Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Narinder Gill, a broker and associate director at Coreco, Josh O'Leary, a broker and director at Mackenzie Byrne, and Andrew Dignum, lending director at Hampshire Trust Bank. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start today by talking about the big issues that we're currently facing as an industry. In your opinion, what is the one greatest challenge you're enduring as a broker or a lender, and what needs to change in order to overcome it or at least improve that situation? Who wants to kick us off?
So I would say the one greatest challenge has been the same for the last 2 or 3 years, which is there's just not enough deals around for our clients, and securing a deal is very, very difficult. The main reason for that is probably out of our control. The planning system is not in a good place.
Yeah.
But there are elements of things that we can do as an industry to help the clients when they do find a deal that they think is worth pursuing. I think it's really important for us as brokers and lenders to be able to respond really quickly to them.
Yeah.
So, if they're on site and they're appraising a deal, they need to know from us very quickly what's the highest they can offer to make it work.
Yeah.
What are their funding costs going to be? How much equity are they going to need to scrape together to put into it? And if we could turn around that information really quickly, even getting them a decision in principle really quickly, that can help them give the confidence to secure the site when they do find it.
Yeah.
I think that would be really important.
And how about you, Andrew?
I think one of the challenges that we're seeing and our clients are seeing is still securing a site, and that comes down to a combination of planning, but also it would appear that until recently site values have held up, or vendors' aspirations of value have really held up.
Yeah.
I could point to a number of deals that either aren't going ahead or are very slow to proceed because of those factors. And I think as well, our industry as a lender, and we share it with clients as well, it's uncertainty all around us at the moment. I think there is light at the end of the tunnel around build cost. I'm hearing more and more about build cost easing, and in fact, in some cases, coming down slightly, which is a positive. We don't really know yet where interest rates may end up, but again, it feels like we're nearing the top of that. So things are starting to improve, I think. But I would go back to what Josh said. Planning is a major issue.
Yeah, agreed. And Narinder, what about yourself? Anything to add?
Yeah, so just to touch on Andrew's points about sellers and their expectations on sites is key at the moment in understanding from a developer's perspective where their aspirations are on purchase prices, and to sellers' expectations of where they ultimately want to sell at. There's been a slight stubbornness I've come across with a misalignment between what a developer wants to purchase at and where his numbers need to be at in order to make the lender fruitful for both him and lender. And managing that process alongside the developer has been key. Recently, a number of our clients, we quite commonly have conversations with about contingencies, overruns, again, touching on the instability of cost of works. There's inflationary pressures still feeling pretty hard at the moment, but ultimately they are starting to settle, which is positive. But it's just more so working on ensuring the values of those sites are being purchased at the correct values.
Yeah, okay. So from the three of you, planning, stubbornness of perhaps vendors' demands on what they expect to achieve. With land prices, for me, is residual land value. So the developer's doing that presumably, but how do we translate that to the vendor? Is there a responsibility on agents perhaps to educate their sellers?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've actually seen a decrease in some land prices over the last couple of months.
Yep.
Which has taken a very long time. I mean, people have been saying that land prices need to come down for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And we've seen some deals come back around that were originally priced much higher. So I think there is finally some movement in that because, as the guys have said, developers were already squeezed on build costs. Now they're squeezed on profit with interest rates going up. So something had to give. And I think it is finally starting to give a little bit.
I think also, just to touch on that point, it's not helped with somewhat of a bottleneck post-pandemic of developers itching to get back out there.
You sure?
That's really not. It's artificially helped.
So it's been overheated. There's
Exactly.
been increased demand.
There's quite often multiple interested parties on sites, which when you're having conversations with sellers about realistic residual land values, working backwards, then GDV, touching on increased costs, interest rates, inflationary pressures. These are conversations that aren't easy to have, but needing to be had, and it's not helped particularly when the developers are now having to work harder to find the correct sites.
Yeah. Okay. And just bringing you in quickly, Andrew. Obviously, there is an abundance of credit.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
How's that feeding into everything, and what are the challenges for you as a lender on that side when trying to compete with others?
Yeah, so we feel a lot of the same challenges that developers feel, really. Obviously, land values is an issue, planning can slow deals down. But when we're looking at a deal, obviously we are trying to make as many of the uncertainties certainties, and that's difficult at the moment, or has been very difficult. There is an abundance of credit, there's an abundance of competition, and actually, HTB just being one of many in the sort of the specialist development finance market, we're chomping at the bit to do more business. That is sometimes slowed down by planning, access to sites. I don't want to make this all about planning, by the way. And I think we're still doing deals, and we're busy this year. We've done a lot of business, and I think that's been really positive. I know our competition have. We're seeing plenty of flow through the broker markets as well, and I think I've certainly seen an uptick in opportunities in the last couple of months, especially, and that probably ties back to the realisation or the inevitability around land price correction and some of the softening of build cost inflation and perhaps more certainty around interest rates. So those challenges are starting to ease a little bit. Biggest challenge for us will be competition going forward, but that will never change. Yeah,
of course. So I know you just said you don't want to make this all about planning, but let's bring it back to planning. If you were in government, if you were the housing minister, what would need to happen to sort of really get this problem solved?
Yeah, it's a complex area, and I'm not going to sit here and say I've got the answers to it. Something's got to change. I think a lot of the time, the frustrations that customers of ours feel isn't necessarily around the conditionality of the planning. It's the pace of it, it's the speed of response. It's the turnaround times of applications, turnaround times of appeals. You can be talking 2, 3, 4 years before you get to a point where a site can proceed from a planning perspective.
Sure.
That's too long.
But with permitted development, obviously there's enforced timelines there. Is that something that needs to be adopted wholesale, perhaps?
Most definitely. I think cutting the red tape away and getting the access to decision makers within the planning industry is massive. Permitted development rights has got a long way in helping that. I think there could be some further improvements made to speed up decision making. Clarity is key, particularly when you're working on a contentious site where you need the planning officers or planning departments on side and to be talking with them. Quite often there's months, if not a very long time, where you're even talking to the right people on these sites.
Yeah.
I mean, I think part of the problem is the way that the planning committees are structured and how they function. Like, it's very often that the planning officer works part-time and it's only there 1 or 2 days a week, and you can't get hold of them very easily, and that's why it drags on. It's not career focused. Like, you don't have people wanting to be planning officers like straight out of uni as that like a career that they can go into. And I think if you changed elements of that to make it function a bit more like a business pack, maybe with targets and things like that, I think that could help speed things up a bit.
Yeah, good. Actually, a friend of mine who's a developer says that he goes and sits in the council's offices. So he'll email his planning officer and then go and sit in their office until they respond. And he said that gets quite good results. So he'll sit there with a flask in the lunchbox until they respond. Anyway, great. Thanks for that, guys. So moving on. So something that excites me is that we're finally seeing some prop tech solutions popping up throughout the industry. How important do you think embracing technology is to evolving our industry, And what impact do you think PropTech will have for brokers, lenders, and developers going forward? Who wants to take that one?
Sure. Exciting times, definitely. I think the infancy of PropTech, and particularly with platforms like yourself, are having such a big effect and a knock-on effect between not only brokers, lenders, and developers. I think the ease of access in terms of funding is becoming far, far better. Speed, dialogue, communication, getting deals and papers to decision makers a lot easier and quicker is huge. And I think the submission routes now, where you're not going old school with paper, it's more so this is a submission route. We can get it between multiple lenders very quickly, gauge appetite to lend, and differentiate the difference in costings is key. And I think lenders are actually reciprocating really well to that also, particularly with how they're redesigning and implementing massive resources into their back office to support such types of fintech propositions.
Great. And how about yourself, Andrew? What's happening at HTB in terms of tech evolution?
So, as Narinder alluded to, lenders are embracing it, and we're no different. It's not going away, and that's a good thing. So there's a lot going on in behind the scenes at HTB with regards to improving our processes, including our application turnaround times, improving our sort of our data as well, and also it's from our perspective it's transparency, speed, efficiency. It's what everybody needs in the property industry, whether you're a broker, developer, a lender. Everybody can benefit from it, and as a bank we're no different. So we will continue to embrace it, and we're seeing customers use technology more and more as well now, as well, which is a positive. So it's here to stay, and I think it's a really positive thing.
Yeah, I mean I've heard it said that this is possibly the last industry anywhere in the world to be touched by technology. So it does seem to be that finally we've seen some green shoots. Josh?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's very old-fashioned, this industry, and it's way behind times. Yeah. Like the amount of time spent, once a deal's got a decision in principle, and it's in that bit where it's the valuation, the QS, the solicitors, the amount of time that we as brokers spend herding the cats and trying to get it moving and chasing solicitors and all of that is silly, really. So
there's a lot of stakeholders, right? And all of them need to be performing. Yeah,
exactly. And you're managing multiple email threads, and you've got to-do lists on Word documents. Like it's all very behind the times, and a centralized prop tech to sort that out so that you can log on. Your developer wants an update on where the legals are. You can see the solicitor's done that, he hasn't done that. That's really important.
And how do you? I mean, a lot of this comes down to the legal process as well. So, what changes do you think need to come about in the legal process, or what would you like to see technology adopted sort of in the post application process as well?
Yeah, I think it's always a touchy subject. Bringing up with solicitors how you think they should change their practices. I think it's always difficult, and the only thing that we can do, it's not really technology related, but it's important for us to encourage our clients to work with firms big enough to handle the workload. I think a lot of what happens is they go for a smaller firm because it's cheaper up front, and then it takes 2 or 3 times the length of time, and they spend way more money on it. Exactly. So I think that element's important. And yeah, like I said before, I think getting all of the professionals, the solicitor, the valuer, the QS, all on the same centralized tech system so that it's manageable, and we can request updates really quickly, and those sorts of things would be really important if they were open to it.
Andrew?
I think in some ways professionals perhaps rely on tech too much, too many emails, too many back and forth dialogue via email. Actually, when you're in the thick of a transaction, solicitor picking up the phone to another solicitor often results in progress. So I think whilst technology is, and the prop tech element is crucial, that human interaction element of it cannot go away. And
I was actually going to come back to that. As a lender, do you find that actually you need to actually ditch the technology sometime and just go out and see it? Can you be too reliant on the data and perhaps miss opportunities because the comparables don't quite work for what you're looking at? Whereas actually, if you go and see the site, it makes sense on the ground, if you see what I mean.
We've got to be smart when we use tech, and we've got to deploy it in the right situations. I don't think you're ever going to substitute going out and seeing a site and actually going and walking that site with the customer or the broker or both. And I think there's always going to be a relationship angle to development finance. You've got to complement that with the right tech as well, because tech can save you time in other areas, allowing you, freeing you up to spend more time with customers. It doesn't always work like that at the moment, but I think as a lender, we're very much set up to be boots on the ground in the regions across the UK. So we have, people similar to myself who are dotted all over the country, and our model, we're structured so that we can be on site with customers with regularity, and it is a relationship, and that won't change for us, but we will embrace the tech in other areas, and I think it is important that we keep doing that.
Yeah, I think that perfectly sums it up. Is the tech is there to complement, and it really is there to help free you up to do more of the relationship building. I mean, certainly with Brickflow, that's our ethos is, get you out from behind your desk so you can actually go to site, meet your clients and spend more time and add more value that way. And in terms of a developer, where should they be looking for their opportunities at the moment? Is it new build? Is it land banking? Is it commercial? Is it mixed use? Like what are the general thoughts of the panel?
Commercial, in my opinion, could be a very good opportunity for developers. With the difficulties in placing commercial term finance, it's going to bring an abundance, in my opinion, of commercial properties to the market. A lot of developers are having conversations with us about those types of commercial sites where there's a heavy weighting on residentials, for example, and above. And if you can be quite clever and coy about identifying those sites where you can get more attractive cost of funds on term refis or on resales, they're really good opportunities, particularly on the heavier weighted residential element, residential sites. So that would be, for me, an area that I'm advising my clients to seek opportunities.
Okay, so repurposing the high street and industrial areas near city centres. Yeah, okay. Anything to add, guys?
We just tell our developers to keep it simple. There's a housing shortage. There's always going to be demand for well-priced houses in decent areas. And that's our bread and butter. We do ground-up residential SME development, and I think there's always going to be demand from that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I'd concur on that. I think there's a structural undersupply of housing across the country. That's more prevalent in certain regions, and I think Northwest specific, which is where I'm based, there's a significant undersupply of good quality housing, and I think there's a real opportunity for the SME developer market to really thrive in the coming years to help meet that demand. And the contribution made by SME developers should never be underestimated either. And I think it's a really, we all around this table play a really important part and an important role in supporting that.
Yeah, the housing shortage seems to be growing rather than declining. Yeah. So based on everything we've discussed today, is 2023 a good time to be a broker, lender or developer in the commercial property space, and why?
I think it's always a good time to be any of those. And 2023, I think we've had a few tough years. Obviously, we've had COVID, had the war in Russia and the Ukraine, and there's been some real challenges in recent years. 2023, I kind of feel like there's green shoots. I think there's opportunity, and I think there's always opportunity when there's challenge. And I think that's always true of the property market. I've always found that as a lender as well. When things are tough, there is opportunities. There's opportunities for growth, and there'll be opportunities for new business for us. So I think 2023 is a good time to be in the property market, broker, lender, or developer. And I think 2024 will be even better as well.
Okay. I mean, there is something to be said about construction and property development is almost before everyone else in terms of recession. So it could be argued perhaps that part of the economy has already sort of been through its recession or is starting to come out before the rest. I mean, perhaps other industries, other economies have still got to suffer, but certainly construction and development, where what you're building is 2 years away from actually delivery, you tend to find that the cycle is much further forward in the economy. Are you seeing that as well, guys, from the broker side?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone probably experienced a slowdown last autumn after the mini budget. That was a difficult period for everyone involved, and then it's been incredibly buoyant since January.
Yeah.
So is it possible that slowdown was it for us? Maybe. I think that we're in for volatile times ahead still. You know, I think the inflation figures that came in recently were unexpectedly high. So it's unsure what's going to happen with interest rates going forward. So that may have an effect. But like Andrew said, I think volatile times do really create opportunity if you're ready for it.
Yeah.
So as brokers, for example, we've seen an increase in development exit deals this year because of the interest rate increase and how that's impacting the sales cycle. So for us, you know, if we're ready to take advantage of those opportunities, then it will be great. But yeah, I think 2023 will still have quite a lot of volatility in it coming up.
Yeah. And Narinder?
Definitely. I think from both a lender, a broker, and developer perspective, there's certainly opportunities to be taken advantage of this year. I think what's come about since what Joshua was mentioning, post-budget, or mini-budget rather, is almost a settling of expectation now. People are aware and understand where cost of funds are now. And that was in the initial shock. You know, overnight we saw swaps and very quickly become a lot higher than where they have been and spiked up and down with many a reason over the last quarter and 2 quarters. I'm seeing and having conversations with developers who are understanding of where cost of funds are at now.
Yep.
You know, they're now factoring in against previous historic cost of funds and mitigating X amount of equity to apportion any overruns, increased borrowing costs, coupled with opportunities in this year and next year with changes in commercial EPC ratings being enforced. I do think there's strong opportunities this year. There are challenges, but again, with what Andrew said, challenges will bring opportunities.
There always are, though, right, in this
Definitely.
industry.
Definitely.
It's just who navigates them the best. And did anyone actually lose any transactions like after the mini budget? Yeah,
We did.
Yeah.
We lost quite a big one.
Yeah.
That the equity investor got spooked on, and then we had another one that was delayed and then chopped in half.
Right.
So it definitely spooked a lot of people.
Yeah.
For sure. But then, you know, people seemed to think the world was going to end, and then it didn't. You know, and then people are taking that as an opportunity to just crack on.
And for people that are sort of worried about volatility, what sort of tips could you give them perhaps to help them navigate uncertain times? I mean, you just talked there about perhaps phasing a development as one opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, the main tip that I give people is to look back on the past 3 years of volatility. You know, we've had 3 or 4 major global crises that the industry...
Coming thick and fast, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Like once in a decade crisis every year.
That the industry has ridden out.
Yeah.
You know, so there's nothing that developers can do other than do their job.
Yeah.
And if they're appraising their sites properly, if they've got the land value right, if they've got the sales values right, there's always going to be demand for it. So
yeah, I think that's a critical part, isn't it? The land price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think from a broker perspective, I think it's been key and more evident than ever, making sure you've got the right support of the right funders behind you.
Yeah.
And that's been integral in the last 6 months, I found, with a number of sites where individuals have ultimately been left at the altar. You know, there's been nervousness, quite rightly so, felt by all parties, but it's also given an opportunity to showcase confidence or support from the right lenders who are still willing to weather the storm with the client. And that's been key in material and saving some of our transactions. We had a couple of sites where lenders did, you know, pull the rug, and ultimately it was an opportunity then from a lender's perspective to step in and say, right, let's get to grips with what's going on. How can we support the borrower? How can we support the site and the broker? So I think it's been good on one sense. It's ultimately not been very good in one sense, with lenders having to, for many a reason, political, economic, external factors, withdraw or semi-withdraw from the market. But it's been a good time for other lenders to step up and show what they can do to support in times like now.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting the next couple of years to see how that will fare with those lenders and those borrowers continuing to work together.
I think it's at these sort of times where brokers really are in demand. You know, when credit is rife and times are good, you know, perhaps you find borrowers get a bit complacent and, you know, they feel that they can borrow from anyone. Whereas now I find in these kind of more uncertainty, I find that there is that, you know, definite flocking towards somebody that knows perhaps more than me in the industry. And is that, you know, do you think that's true as well, Andrew?
Yeah, so I think a lot of conversations historically have been, what's the price and what's the leverage? And I want the best on both, and that's fair enough. That probably won't change, but I'm having more and more conversations now around certainty of delivery, clarity, consistency. People asking as well about, you know, HTB specific here, how are we financed, how are we structured, what's our capital base look like? There's more and more conversations like that, and that's what, you know, they're really good conversations to have, because you know, as a regulated lender, we held our nerve during the mini budget. We've remained consistent with our approach, our policies, and that is starting to bear fruit now, without doubt. You know, we've stepped in where other lenders have, you know, they've realigned their appetite, they've reduced their leverage, and that's absolutely fine. But I think for us, so we've remained consistent during a challenging time. Hopefully, that will pay dividends for us in the future.
Yeah, consistency's a real strength, I think, at the moment. Okay, great. Well, look, it sounds like it's a positive year, potentially for everyone, if we can navigate some of the financial uncertainty. But thanks to everyone for joining. So Narinder from Coreco, Josh from Mackenzie, Byrne, Andrew Dignum from Hampshire Trust Bank. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.